Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi there, this is Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance, where our business is the success of your business. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, facilitator, and your host of the Elevate Business podcast. The Elevate Business podcast is a journey of discovery fueled by the curiosity to genuinely understand what makes people tick when it comes to their professional path, choices made, and the personal characteristics that drive performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately success. The Elevate Business podcast is here to promote the enormous contributions of small and medium-sized businesses around the world by exploring the actions that make a workplace successful, the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of an organization, and how we build whole person performance from the ground up. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, growing our learning edges, and honoring our passions with a special guest who has elevated their business, overcome obstacles, and inspires others to do the same. So glad you're here. Hi, and a warm welcome to episode number 16 of the Elevate Business podcast. Both myself, Ange McCabe, and Scott Rust are your hosts, and we have the pleasure of introducing you to Erin Blaskie, who has a passion for technology, is a startup mentor, TEDx speaker, and very well recognized within the founder and tech community in Ottawa. In 2004, not 2014, 2004, Erin launched a virtual assistant startup offering her services and leading a team remotely before it was a thing to do. She brings that experience as director of marketing to Fellow.app, empowering their team while working remotely. Welcome, Erin.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
It's our pleasure. We're really excited to dig in as well. So tell us about yourself, your journey, and a little bit about your company.
Sure. Yeah. So I never know where to start because, life is long. But I think I'll give a few highlights that I think have contributed to sort of where I have landed today. So I always like to start back in 1986, which sounds like this is going to take a long time, but I promise it won't. But back in 1986, my dad came home one day, and I didn't grow up with a whole lot. Like my family was definitely blue collar family. But one day my dad came home with this computer, and he came home with a Commodore 64, which a lot of, younger people don't know what that is. But thankfully I was sort of on the cusp of that generation. And he came home with this computer and put it down in front of us, my sister and I, and it sort of opened my eyes instantly to, what technology was, what it could do, the possibilities. And I got really excited about technology, from a very early age. Mm-hmm. And I remember even my sister and I playing Office at home, and I was the CEO and she was the secretary. She's younger, so that, she had to. But this was just something that I didn't have any examples of what it meant to be a CEO. I didn't have examples of what it meant to be an entrepreneur in my family. But I just had this innate desire right away. And this almost like this pull toward, business and tech and everything from really early on. So that sort of continued throughout my life. I was very entrepreneurial. I was the weird, kid who was coming up with all kinds of ways to sell everything to anyone, including birch bark to nearby neighbors that had cottages. And they bought it. I mean, it was probably just that I was a little kid going door to door, and that was cute. But anyway, these patterns continued. And so when I was in high school, I kind of had this idea to start a company. I didn't start it then because my aunt and uncle offered me a job in an ice cream shop instead. So I took that. But the business idea that I had it was sort of the same business that I launched in 2004. It looked a little different. I was going to offer word processing skills back in high school to local businesses. But when I launched the business in 2004, I actually took it virtual. Like the internet had evolved by then. There was much more, possibilities. So I sort of set up this virtual assistance business, landed my first client within 2 weeks, had a full roster by 6 months, and then quit my job and started working in that company. And I did that for 14 years, grew the company from just myself to 25 subcontractors and freelancers and different moving parts. We worked with over 300 clients globally. And then I hit a pretty significant wall of burnout inside of that period, which then led me to start reevaluating, both my life, my career, where I wanted to go. And that veered me back into the real world, so to speak, the real working world. So I took a job at a startup accelerator and then landed at Fellow. So Fellow is really exciting for me. I'm a productivity nerd, and Fellow is a great tool for managers and teams and their meetings. And so sort of lots of things I've covered in that time period, but we can dig into any one of those areas. But it's been a wild ride over the last 30, actually my birthday's tomorrow, so 38 years. Yeah.
Well, most importantly, happy birthday tomorrow, Erin.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's certainly a lot to dig in there. So, it sounds to me like having that entrepreneurial spark for you started early on.
Yes.
So, and within that, I can hear inklings around performance and what that definition means to me. When you hear the word performance, what does it mean to you?
Oh, this is honestly such a great question, and I'll be I'm a very transparent person, so I hope you're both okay with the level of transparency.
Yeah.
But, I spent a lot of time in therapy unpacking performance, and the reason is because I actually have a tumultuous relationship with some of the societal definitions of performance, and what I mean by that is I think early on in my life, I received a lot of attention and a lot of praise when I was performing in a certain way. Like if I was getting straight A's, if I was doing really well in different extracurriculars, I got a lot of attention for that. And it sort of built this it built me into the type of person that my self-worth was attached to, the level of performance that I was moving toward.
Yeah.
Now, that's if I look at it through only the lens of like what, more often in society, people view success as being, or they view people that are successful in a certain light. So for me, as I moved through that very uncomfortable area of performance where I was only like my self-worth was attached to performance. It had to be really high. It had to be, nonstop and ongoing. As I unpacked that, both with therapy and also just time experience and growing, I realized that actually performance for me isn't always achieving what society thinks success looks like, but it's actually achieving a level of internal success. And and I have to define that for myself. So whereas like society may view success as being a big house and a big, a fancy car or designer clothes or whatever it might be, for me, I actually realized through, again, really digging in and discovering a lot about myself that performance to me really means, can I show up happy and feeling fulfilled to my work every day? Can I do work that leads to financial security? I don't need to be rich, but like for me personally, I just want to feel financially secure. Can I be the role model I want to be for my daughter? Am I practicing self-care? Like there's a lot in it, but performance really for me is less now about how much am I achieving, and it's more about how am I feeling. And if the feeling part is really rock solid, and I can really tune into that element of it, it's less about like, am I checking every single thing off the to-do list every day. Yeah.
I know there's a lot to dive in there, and both Ange and me are like waiting to see who's going to go first. I know I think that the last portion there, Erin, talking about your journey and everything, and talking about the difference between performance in the past was about achievement, and today it's more internal. It's more about how I'm feeling.
Yes.
Was there a specific like moment in time that shift was kind of made? Was it a journey? What were maybe some of the key things that came up that maybe other people who feel like they're attaching their performance to achievement might be able to learn from your experience?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And so I think a big thing for me was feeling like I was on a hamster wheel and I could never get off the hamster wheel. And no matter what I was achieving, it never felt like enough. And those two things, like the constant, basically just running super, super fast all the time, yet never feeling like I really arrived or feeling happy with any of the accomplishments, was a huge wake up call for me. And that honestly led to two things. It led to when I was about 25, I it wasn't when I hit the significant wall of burnout, but I had definitely some inklings of this feeling of something's not right. Like this doesn't feel normal. I probably should feel a lot happier than I am given the level I was achieving at a young age. And I ended up hiring actually a quarter life crisis coach. These people exist. They actually they're out there. And I remember hiring her, and the work I did with her was actually quite phenomenal to start unpacking some of it. But then I moved from that into getting a local psychotherapist to help me through that, really digging into some of the deep rooted issues. But I think the awareness that I had around something's not right, I don't feel satisfied, even though I'm achieving again a level of performance and an achievement that others would be very happy with, I wasn't feeling it. So I think that was one moment. And then definitely when I hit the wall of burnout, when I was I think I was about 20, maybe 30, 32, anyway, somewhere around that age frame or time frame. I hit that significant wall of burnout. It was a culmination of a lot of things happening all at once, both personally and professionally. And I was a mom a new mom, and just a lot all at once. But it was the same thing. I hadn't really learned the lessons and made changes from my mid-20s. I was like, okay, that was great. I understand what they want me to do, but I'm not going to do it because I'm going to keep doing this other path. But that came to a head pretty significantly. And I was sort of forced at that point to make a change. It was either that or, I just wasn't going to be able to function at all. So I think self-awareness, I think if I had to boil it down to just one word.
Very powerful. And so 3 really great things that I'm taking away from this, Erin, is, and like to spend a little time on curiosity around this too, if you don't mind, is we really can't separate the kind of logistical objective performance or what companies think of or how we should drive our business and how society influences us as to what success is. We really need to look within and identify, with our whole self. So not just that tangible thing, but how does it also resonate with us as a whole person?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with wanting, material things or, going after certain goals or attaching, performance to a certain metric or whatever it looks like. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the relationship you have with it. At least in my own experience, that's what it was. It was the relationship I had with that. And it was a very unhealthy relationship.
And I think this is a really important message for everyone out there from a professional standpoint, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader or a young professional, is that wrapping that thought process around what is my relationship with this, with this tangible, with this piece of performance. So I really appreciate the candor that you're bringing with regards to your insights and background there. And so now that you have gone through all of that hard work in developing almost what I would dub a healthy relationship with what you define as performance for yourself, and it showing up as something that's a good feeling consistently, how do you continue to feel that for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what's nice is that I still feel a lot of intrinsic motivation. So even though I'm not necessarily chasing, very specific tangible things, I do still feel very intrinsically motivated, but it's interesting. Like the reasons why I feel those things have changed as my relationship to it has changed. So for me personally, I love being in a manager role because I love being able to influence other people's happiness. I love being able to make sure that work, when they show up to it, is very rewarding. And as a result, I actually like setting pretty ambitious goals for like my department that are performance-based goals. But the primary reason I'm doing it is actually to help them with their own career goals, or, really push them to grow as people, et cetera. So it's interesting, like the motivation and the performance metrics and everything else are still there.
Yes.
And I actually still use them a lot in everything to, both push myself, but also push my team.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just the relationship has slightly changed. And I think how we do that is we really think about, what impact does our work have on the world? And, rather than just thinking about it from a very, self-centered perspective, or a very, business perspective only, we actually think about the humans that we interact with, and the humans that are in our customer base, and the humans that exist in our prospecting and things like that. And it's really about how can we take what we know, our expertise, our experience, our skill sets, et cetera, and really drive that knowledge out into the world to make them better as well. And I mean, you both know this very well. It's your entire work, right? You're working with performance and leaders, and we're working with managers often, and on their productivity side and on their meeting side. And so it's similar. And the main reason that we're motivated to do very well in our business, and through our marketing specifically, and as a team, is really so that we can help more people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the biggest change, is that I used to be driven, I think, a lot by how does the performance benefit me? And now it's like, how does my performance benefit others, whether it's my team, the world, our customers, whatever it looks like. So yeah, I think it's more driving performance for those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think this is a good segue. You talked a little bit about, how you love this manager role and working with other people and empowering them. So how do you create an environment for your team to thrive? And maybe lean a little bit even into the remote world, where you have like 13 years of experience working with remote teams, where a lot of companies now, are just getting into it, don't even have a year under their belt yet. What's some insights you might be able to share with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting, when I was working remote pre-pandemic, it was very different. Remote work back then looks very different than remote work today. The primary reason is because obviously we're remote working in a crisis, not necessarily just remote working in the most optimal or ideal scenario. So there are some, I would say, significant differences that already exist. One of the biggest differences is just that a lot of your management style had to shift and change after the pandemic happened. You had to leverage a lot more empathy and compassion for, the world and the situation we're all in, but also for your individual team members, because for each of them, their situations were different. If I look at even myself, my daughter came home in those early days, and I was then balancing being at, Fellow for only 4 weeks when the pandemic hit, but also, having my daughter now at home with me and trying to make sure that she's set up for success. And, there was a lot going on for a lot of people. And so I think, what we did really early on as a team, I did leverage some of the, frameworks and processes and operations that I had from my past, but they needed to be tweaked a little bit as well. So we did do a few things early on that really helped. So implementing a daily stand-up meeting was really valuable. Even if it was just honestly a check-in on people's feelings. How are you doing today? What can I do to, make sure that today feels like a success for you? Really checking in on the people and emotional side, less than the project side. Now, the project side obviously still has to happen, and tasks still need to be done, and work still has to move forward. But for us, at least, the main focus shifted instantly to our people. It was, how do we ensure that they're set up for success? And And that did continue. So, I would say that what we've moved to now that we've been in this for 9 or 10 months, we still do those daily check-ins. We actually do this really great check-in where it's color-based. So we're not necessarily having to define how we're feeling or maybe talk about it if we're not really willing to, but it's just simply like on a scale of red to green, with every color in between. And also we have a mango version, which is really fun because it's like a blend between, if you're not quite green, but you're not quite yellow, it's like you're mango. And so, like we have this like range now, and every day, everybody can, say how they're feeling simply by just adding an emoji to a Slack message, like it's simple. But those simple things like that, the daily stand-up meetings, regular check-ins, regular company all hands, these things are all contributing to us still feeling like a team and feeling very connected to each other, and having the ability and the space to talk about things that are much more emotionally based is really key. Outside of that, if we look just simply at things like projects and tasks, I'm really fortunate that I have had the 14 years of experience working remote, because from a process perspective and an operational perspective, I thrive in this environment. Like this is like all I know, right? So for me, it's really simple for me to leverage technology, whether it's Slack or Zoom or of course Fellow or project management tool, like whatever tools we need to do our work. It's easy for me to leverage those and still drive through like the goals and the objectives and our KPIs and everything through those platforms in a remote way. But I think the piece that's the most interesting in the context of our conversation is definitely the like shifts that had to be made in how we were, showed up as managers and leaders, I think as a company.
I'm hearing there something that's really powerful. So it's not just about leveraging the technology and creating spaces for one-on-one meetings and team meetings. And I think you had said all hand meetings. So there's actually different types of meetings that you attach it to. And so it's not just about the operations, but it's also checking in with the individuals or the individual teams to see what's up and what's going on with them specifically without a hidden agenda, if I'm hearing that correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's also remembering too, that not everybody's done this before. Like not everyone's worked remote. So I think sometimes, everyone, and, we see this all the time, everyone has different working styles, different communication styles. And when you're thrust into a remote environment, a lot of those things that, just naturally happen in an office environment where you're sort of running into people, it's easy to walk to someone's desk like that. There's an extra burden to all of that when you think about having to even type out a full message versus just speaking it. And so I think, the technology is definitely helps. It's one facet of it, but I think as a manager, especially, you need to really be aware of the different styles that exist within your team and try to play to everyone's strengths. And the last thing I'll say on meetings, just because obviously we're a meetings platform, so it's a place I spend a lot of time.
That's okay.
But what we're finding as a team is that actually we're not necessarily booking more live meetings. We do have those; those are very helpful. But we're also leveraging async meetings, or asynchronous meetings, where we hold a calendar placeholder just so we can build the agenda in Fellow, but we actually don't show up to that meeting live. And what we do instead is we all kind of collaboratively contribute to the agenda, and it's really great. The reason I say this is because a lot of teams are feeling a bit of Zoom burnout. They're feeling a bit of meeting burnout. And if that's the case, you don't necessarily need to do all your meetings live. You could actually leverage a lot of these asynchronous meetings, and people can just show up to the agenda, when it works for them. So there's a lot that can be done to really, I think, play to people's strengths.
That's an interesting concept. To be totally honest, I haven't heard much about asynchronous meetings. Can you briefly tell us how that works operationally? So if I'm understanding correctly, management would set agenda times, but team members can just kind of pop in when it's convenient for them based on their schedule.
Yeah. I'll give you I'll give you a really easy example. So we have a daily stand-up in the marketing on the marketing team. And what we realized early on is we don't actually need to go through the whole process of like getting on Zoom or getting on Google Meet or whatever and having the conversation. What we're really interested in is, what are you working on today? And are there any blockers that are in your way? How can I as your manager help? How can other team members help? And really, those are the things we're most interested in surfacing. Right. And so what we did is we created a recurring event. It happens every morning, 9:30 to 10. It's held in our calendars, but we actually don't show up to that meeting live. Instead, we use Fellow because it's a collaborative agenda tool. We use it to, we have like the same headings every single day, and people just pop in, whether it's the night before or that morning, whenever they like to do their planning, and they fill in what they're going to do that day and what the blockers are. Okay. And that's it. And then I, as the manager, can go in and then it also can, creates a full record of every single meeting we've ever had. So it's a great place for us to track that stuff as well as a team.
Mm-hmm. And conversely, what have been some of the nuances with the remote workforce essentially at this point in time?
Yeah, I would say definitely communication is probably the biggest one. I think it's really easy to not communicate as much when you're working remote, and you also don't hear the in-office chatter. So, if I think back to when we were in the office, we had an open floor plan. We all sat in rows, like very startup-y. We all sat in rows, but you could hear everyone all the time. So if like a team over here was talking about a specific problem or a challenge, or they were talking about, a feature that we were building out, you could hear it. You didn't, you weren't sitting there just listening all the time, but if something was related to, you or your position, you were likely to hear it. Whereas now that we're all working remote, companies may not even realize this, but a lot of communication and conversation is actually happening in DMs, like in direct messages, right? Like they're not even being surfaced necessarily to public or shared Slack channels. And so as a result, what's happening is all of these sidebar conversations are happening that aren't being surfaced. And so I think companies that will succeed well in remote will put a heavy emphasis on surfacing more of those conversations to a public forum, which is why, we obviously are in the tech space. We love leveraging technology for this purpose. But there's lots of things people can do beyond just, technology. I mean, obviously in a remote situation, you have to leverage it to a degree.
Right.
You have to jump on a Google Meet or a Zoom or pick up the phone or something. But I think it's just the companies that put an emphasis on really opening up those lines of communication and over communicating will do a lot better than those that don't.
And I'm wondering how that could look would be, so just kind of taking this into the concept of cross-team collaboration. So really building your culture around that from a remote workplace standpoint could be, something like a global group of problems and resolutions. So everybody can kind of check in with that on a weekly basis, or however that shows up, and however you use technology is really trying to understand and emphasize global successes and champions, and also global issues and ways to manage that and open more dialogue across teams versus just in the silos of either one-on-one or individual teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for any company listening, I'll give you one other example of what we do that's been really helpful. Because I'm very tactical. So I love, if I'm listening to anything, I'm like, what are the takeaways? What can I bring back into my own company? So one thing we do that's been honestly really, really amazing is that we have developed something that we call a weekly summary. And it's a company-wide again, calendar item, because we run everything through the calendar, but it's a company-wide meeting. It happens Fridays at 4 p.m. and it's we call it the weekly summary. Again, it's a collaborative agenda that's done asynchronously, but it essentially is broken down by department. So every department every Friday fills out this weekly summary, and they cover off exactly what you were just talking about: challenges, celebrations, places where they're, stuck, that they need the support of another team, any metrics that are interesting from their department that other departments would find kind of cool. And so then what we do with that data is it lives in Fellow forever, but we also, on Sundays, our CEO actually sends that agenda to himself, and then he forwards it to all of us with an email from him every single week. And that email basically is him, kind of celebrating the week, talking about the highlights, talking about the challenges, surfacing anything from a very transparent message perspective around, maybe there's like some team stuff that he needs to talk about or operational, but he puts it in there. And it's honestly been phenomenal to keep us all feeling like the work we're doing cross-functionally matters, and that, we're really working as a team, even remote. So I think any company could implement that. And it's honestly just a really great touch point especially from our CEO. And I know a lot of people find it very inspiring.
Yeah. That's fantastic insights. And so when it comes to all of this from a management perspective in remote teams, what is your approach to holding team members accountable?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I would say that our culture at Fellow is very heavily dominated by feedback and one-on-ones. So we'd actually be like, we should talk about this offline sometime, but I think you'd actually really enjoy learning a little bit more about like our operations and things especially from a performance perspective. But I would say we are hyper-focused on one-on-ones and feedback. And as a result, when it comes to accountability, we're having these conversations weekly where we're digging into, both career goals, but also any challenges that are showing up, roadblocks, opportunities. And we have baked into our company values a growth mindset. Like one of the things that like our company values is, to experiment and grow. And so as a result, we're all sort of focused on that philosophy. And so for accountability, it shows up in many meetings for sure, in many different ways and projects. But I would say it's single-handedly focused on in both the one-on-one and also our regular feedback cycles. It shows up there a lot.
Fantastic.
I know we could probably jam out about this for the next hour or two.
I know.
But I think, a lot of the takeaways here in terms of, communicating with teams and really checking on the people. And again, like this is just in line with intuitive performance, but, checking on the person behind the role rather than just the role itself. And
Absolutely.
not just saying, what are you doing in your job? But what color are you today? Are you mango? And if you are, how can I support you?
Yes.
From that perspective. And, one of the questions we asked all of our participants is, what are 3 words of inspiration that you'd like the world to hear?
Oh my gosh, 3 words, like 3 individual words or 3 words strung into a sentence? Or do I get to pick?
That's the great part about being the interviewee. You get to choose the answer however you wish.
I would say, I'm going to say focus on humans, I think would be the thing. And only because like I really believe that to be impactful from a management and leadership perspective. I believe it to be impactful from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective. If you focus on humans, I think everything else, starts to fall into place.
That is wonderful. Yeah.
I think we have the headline for our podcast.
Focus on humans. You think I do marketing or something.
I know, right?
I was thinking this could be parsed out into like a meme, with Erin holding the bubble, all that great stuff. We really appreciate you. And thank you so much, Erin, for joining us today.
No worries. Thank you for having me. This is honestly the fastest time. We just went by so fast. So that means it was a great conversation. So thank you.
Wonderful. And we really appreciate sharing your entrepreneurial insights with Intuitive Performance and our subscribers. For those who would like to learn more about Erin and the Fellow app, we're going to be providing a link to the business and your LinkedIn profile as well to our company page and throughout social media. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for all of our subscribers to tuning in into another great episode of the Elevate Business podcast. Take good care. Thanks for listening to the Elevate Business podcast. I hope you enjoyed the program. You can subscribe to future podcasts at intuitiveperformance.com, where you can also sign up for webinars and learn more about professional coaching and our facilitation solutions available to help fire up your whole person performance skills and drive actions for success. Until next time, stay true to you and take care of each other. We are all better together. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.